So it was 2007. It was a time in our marriage where my husband began abusing drugs and alcohol and became unsafe in our home. Just to be safe for myself and my children and protect them, that we had to separate.
When I was young, not only was I in church all the time, but my parents also divorced and they split up. I grew up knowing I was missing something, but out of guilt to feeling like my mom wasn't a good mom, which she is, but out of guilt, I kept that to myself.
I've always had health issues, and so that was nothing new for me. But about 20 years ago, I found out I had cancer. I'm a survivor of that for 20 years. And the last one, 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with congenital heart failure.
Around 2015, I had become the president and CEO of a nonprofit, an economic development agency on Kauai. And around the same time, my dad was dying back in Chicago. And unfortunately, my husband at the time was relapsing into a drug addiction. Then, as the president and CEO of that organization, somehow I was starting a battle with a couple members of the board over the direction of the organization. And it's an area where in some ways I'm not willing to compromise on my values, right, and my integrity on it.
I recall one time during our separation that the state was threatening to take the children away from me too. And I was crying out to God. I said, I didn't do anything. Why would this be happening?
Someone pointed out to me and helped me realize that part of myself that didn't care about my birth dad, and that attitude of mine wasn't because I was healthy and dealing with it well. It was because that part of me was dead.
It was hard, and my self-worth went plummeting, and it was just a super dark time. It was very lonely and very crushing. You know, when you are stripped of the things that you had allocated more than all of your time, if that makes sense, when you're stripped of that, you're suddenly left with a lot of time to pray and a lot of time to think.
I thought I had initially walking pneumonia, and so I went in thinking that's what it was, a problem. As they did the tests, and they found out that my heart wasn't beating the way it should be. It hurt most when I told my sisters, and they came home to be with me, and to see the hurt in their eyes, because what if it was my last days?
As I was sitting and crying, and he appeared and said, well, would you be okay if you had nothing but me? And I froze and I thought about it. And I turned to him and I said, yes, I would be okay.
Soon after processing all this, I was asked by the Collective Young Adults Ministry to speak at a collective summer retreat. And the topic they gave me was passing your past. I began to write this talk and put it together, and then I realized that the Holy Spirit was telling me to not just talk about it, but I had to live it. What that meant was me meeting my birth dad for the first time in decades.
And so I had to learn to sit quietly, and that's the first times I ever heard the Lord say, stop. You need to stop. And you need to wait for me. And you need to be still. And those were really difficult things for me.
I think that was the deepest part of the valley that night. And it just started going up after that. And things started to take on a different tune, a different path, a different light. And I really felt him walking right next to me.
I finally came to the point that when I surrendered all, physically, emotionally, spiritually, I had a peace. And so since 2021, I found out that my heart has recovered. My doctors were amazed. They couldn't believe what happened. They couldn't explain it.
We met and we sat and we talked and we hugged, and I gave him an update of my life, and at the end of all of it, he said, "I'm really glad that we did this."
There's nothing better than things that are done in his way and his timing. And so that's what carried me through, like this valley of, my dad being sick, and this job that was like my whole definition of my being was around this job. And divorce, right? My relationship fell apart.
So looking back at all that we've been through, I know that God has been our protector constantly throughout it all. He never let me go through all of this, through the 4 years, and even through getting back together with my husband, reuniting.
I don't know what the future holds for our relationship. It's an ongoing story that's still being told as I speak. But I do know that that corner has also been turned in the way that I see God as my Father, and that it's written on his heart that he loves me and cares for me.
Was Jesus my protector? Was the good Lord like protecting me and providing? Yeah, darn right he was. When you lose friendships, or when you feel a certain amount of betrayal, or certain things happen, like God is right there. And when he says, I will prepare a table for you before your enemies, like it happens.
From 20 years ago, when I first had my first health issue, that until now, I know no matter what happens, no matter what health conditions, I'll be fine. Because I'm in his hands.